Welcome to AskReddit Army, where real people give real answers. Enjoy the spooky side of internet. Native Americans have written it. What are yours, or your tribe's, ghost stories, legends, or supernatural occurrences? Number 1. The Stickmen. I wasn't originally planning on ever sharing this, as Stickmen seem to be lore, specifically related by a select group of indigenous peoples of Alaska, where I'm from. However, it would appear that many others have had similar experiences, and many more are very curious to hear more on the topic, and so here I am. First, a little about me and my tribe. I know I'm not supposed to share personal information, so I'll keep this as vague as I can, though some specificity is required to describe the context in which the Stickmen are nested. I was born into the Truthful tribe in central Alaska in the 1980s. This is about 50 miles south of Fairbanks, in a small town called Nenana. Hey Balto fans! There are several other tribes in the immediate area, and long ago there were far more, before Russian and American settlement. I don't want to identify myself on accident, in case anyone from there ends up reading this, but suffice to say that paranormal experiences are natural and an expected part of my ancestral heritage. As a child, my grandparents and my father told strange tales of the Stickmen, who were eaters of men. They especially loved the flesh of children, and newborn babies were considered delicacies by these spirits of the forest. One time, when Nenana was first being settled by Gusuk, white people, there was a hunter who came from faraway lands to settle the wilderness of Alaska and to hunt its bears and moose. He took a small party of hunters and native guides into the forest, deep into the countryside to the marshes, where moose and bear frequented. Far down the Tanana they went, shooting every animal they saw: squirrel, moose, wolf, porcupine. The natives were silent and led the men on, afraid to question their violent, wasteful ways. Until late one evening, the hunter called his party to set up camp and rest. They chose a quiet spot in a field, where they could see all around them, in case wolves decided to try to sneak up, and they rolled out their blankets after dinner and went to sleep, leaving some to take turns watching for animals. The hunter had fallen asleep quickly, content on his bed of furs and blankets. He had dreams of sunny days, perfect for hunting the famed grizzly. He was awoken by the sound of cracking sticks. He found this odd, as they were in a field, but perhaps it was men rekindling a fire. Still, he peeked out of his tent flap to check on the encampment. Horror of horrors. There were pools of blood on the ground, but no corpses. He watched as a man, bundled tightly in his blankets, was lifted up by what appeared to be many small, moving sticks, and carried off toward the edge of camp. The man woke up from the gentle rocking of his convoy and screamed, alerting the remaining hunters in the camp, who jumped up and reached for their guns. They were quick to draw, but were confused by what to fire at, as mostly they just saw sticks on the ground, moving in ways that were impossible. They decided to run, because there was nothing clear to shoot, but as they ran together they were chased by giant animals that appeared suddenly from the tall grass. The hunter waited until the men were being chased by all the animals, then jumped from his tent and, without looking back, when he heard their screams, ran as fast as he could, as long as he could. A week later he showed up in Nenana, crazed, exhausted, and on the edge of death. He related his story, and then perished, for he would constantly wake up screaming if he tried to sleep, and thus could not rest. A version of this story is common in my family, though some details change with the storyteller. My father has seen the Stickmen on a hunting trip, and like this apocryphal hunter, he has been crazed and terrorized by the memory ever since. It is said that though the Stickmen go by different names and come to people in different shapes, that there is some regularity to their appearances. They generally come as either sticks, which blend in with trees or the ground until you come upon them, or they can visit as an animal. This animal is usually described as either a large deer or a small moose, which can move incredibly quickly, for how awkwardly it seems to be hunched on its legs. They appear as pale or white animals, and though they usually do this to intimidate men and women, they are hungry beings who feast on the unwary. Seeing a Stickman, one may be haunted for years or their entire life afterwards, but in some cases it is considered good luck, as if a Stickman is uninterested in you, it means that you have powerful ancestors surrounding you. You can usually anticipate the arrival of a stickman, as the entire forest will go quiet around you for as long as they are in the vicinity, and sometimes they will speak to you, and to each other. When this happens, they sound like a raspy whisper, mixed with the rattling of dry willow branches, a light chattering. Do not camp where the forest is silent, and do not look into the eyes of stickmen, for they will drive you mad with fear. I have never seen these spirits personally, at least, I can't be sure. My only experience with one potentially happened outside of Carson City, Nevada. I was driving alone in a big Ford pickup, late at night when I noticed what originally I took to be a deer, on the side of the road. This was no deer. It ran like a dog or cat, staying close to the ground in a liquid motion, whereas deer will bounce or gallop as they run away. Also, it moved at upwards of 30 miles per hour, and when it turned and ran down a hill, I realized it was much larger than almost any deer I've ever seen, yet lacked antlers. Please, ask any questions you have, and feel free to please share your experiences below. Thank you to all who requested this, and gave your support. I really appreciate the interest, and the opportunity to share. Number 2. The Girl Chenoo. I am a pure-blooded MikMaq, and this is one of my tribe legends. My grandfather Akyurt, the bear of the snow, used to tell us often, around the fire. Far up the Saguenay River, a branch turns off to the north, running back into the land of ice and snow. 10 families went up this stream one autumn in their canoes, to be gone all winter on a hunt. Among them was a beautiful girl, 20 years of age. A young man in the band wished her to become his wife, but she flatly refused him. Perhaps she did it in such a way as to wound his pride. Certainly she roused all that was savage in him, and he gave up all his mind to revenge. He was skilled in medicine, or in magic, so he went into the woods, and gathered a herb which makes people insensible. Then stealing into the lodge when all were asleep, he held it to the girl's face, until she had inhaled the odor, and could not be easily awakened. Going out he made a ball of snow, and returning placed it in the hollow of her neck, in front, just below the throat. Then he retired without being discovered. So she could not awake, while the chill went to her heart. When she awoke she was chilly, shivering, and sick. She refused to eat. This lasted long, and her parents became alarmed. They inquired what ailed her. She was ill-tempered. She said that nothing was the matter. One day, having been sent to the spring for water, she remained absent so long that her mother went to seek her. Approaching unseen, she observed her greedily eating snow, and asking her what it meant, the daughter explained that she felt within a burning sensation, which the snow relieved. More than that, she craved the snow. The taste of it was pleasant to her. After a few days she began to grow fierce, as though she wished to kill someone. At last she begged her parents to kill her. Hitherto she had loved them very much. Now she told them that unless they killed her she would certainly be their death. Her whole nature was being changed. "How can we kill you?" her mother asked. "You must shoot at me," she replied, "with 7 arrows, and if you can kill me with 7 shots all will be well. But if you cannot, I shall kill you." 7 men shot at her, as she said in the wigwam. She was not bound. Every arrow struck her in the breast, but she sat firm and unmoved. 49 times they pierced her. From time to time she looked up with an encouraging smile. When the last arrow struck she fell dead. Then they burned the body, as she had directed. It was soon reduced to ashes, with the exception of the heart, which was of the hardest ice. This required much time to melt and break. At last all was over. She had been brought under the power of an evil spirit. She was rapidly being changed into a Chenoo, a wild, fierce, unconquerable being. But she knew it all the while, and it was against her will. So she begged that she might be killed. The Indians left the place. Since that day none have ever returned to it. They feared lest some small part of the body might have remained unconsumed, and that from it another Chenoo would rise, capable of killing all whom she met. Number 3. The Wendigo. I am half Algonquin, and this is the story of my tribe. My family say that Defago was my great-great-grandfather. This is my family and tribe story. A wealthy man wanted to go hunting in a part of northern Canada where few people had ever hunted. He traveled to a trading post and tried to find a guide to take him, but no one would do it. It was too dangerous, they said. Finally, he found an Indian who needed money badly, and he agreed to take him. The Indian's name was Defago. They made camp in the snow near a large frozen lake. For 3 days they hunted, but they had nothing to show for it. The third night a windstorm came up. They lay in their tent, listening to the wind howling, and the trees whipping back and forth. To see the storm better, the hunter opened the tent flap. What he saw startled him. There wasn't a breath of air stirring, and the trees were standing perfectly still. Yet he could hear the wind howling, and the more he listened, the more it sounded as if it were calling Defago's name. Defago. It called. Defago. I must be losing my mind, the hunter thought. But Defago had gotten out of his sleeping bag. He was huddled in a corner of the tent, his head buried in his arms. What's this all about? The hunter asked. It's nothing, Defago said. But the wind continued to call to him, and Defago became more tense and more restless. Defago. It called. Defago. Suddenly, he jumped to his feet, and he began to run from the tent. But the hunter grabbed him and wrestled him to the ground. You can't leave me out here, the hunter shouted. Then the wind called again, and Defago broke loose and ran into the darkness. The hunter could hear him screaming as he went. Again and again he cried, "Oh, my fiery feet, my burning feet of fire." Then his voice faded away, and the wind died down. At daybreak, the hunter followed Defago's tracks in the snow. They went through the woods, down toward the lake, then out onto the ice. But soon he noticed something strange. The steps Defago had taken got longer and longer. They were so long no human being could have taken them. It was as if something had helped him to hurry away. The hunter followed the tracks out to the middle of the lake, but there they disappeared. At first, he thought that Defago had fallen through the ice, but there wasn't any hole. Then he thought that something had pulled him off the ice into the sky. But that made no sense. As he stood wondering what had happened, the wind picked up again. Soon it was howling, as it had the night before. Then he heard Defago's voice. It was coming from up above, and again he heard Defago screaming, "My fiery feet, my burning feet." But there was nothing to be seen. Now the hunter wanted to leave that place as fast as he could. He went back to camp and packed. Then he left some food for Defago, and he started out. Weeks later, he reached civilization. The following year he went back to hunt in that area again. He went to the same trading post to look for a guide. The people there could not explain what had happened to Defago that night. But they had not seen him since then. Maybe it was the Wendigo, one of them said, and he laughed. It's supposed to come with the wind. It drags you along at great speed until your feet are burned away, and more of you than that. Then it carries you into the sky, and it drops you. It's just a crazy story, but that's what some of the Indians say. A few days later, the hunter was at the trading post again. An Indian came in and sat by the fire. He had a blanket wrapped around him, and he wore his hat so that you couldn't see his face. The hunter thought there was something familiar about him. He walked over, and he asked, "Are you Defago?" The Indian didn't answer. "Do you know anything about him?" No answer. He began to wonder if something was wrong, if the man needed help. But he couldn't see his face. "Are you all right?" he asked. No answer. To get a look at him, he lifted the Indian's hat. Then he screamed. There was nothing under the hat but a pile of ashes. Number 4. The Flying Witch. My tribe is the Cheyenne River Lakota, and this is my true experience about the Flying Witch. It was after midnight. Perhaps 1 a.m. It was the weekend, and all the girls were still up late. I was the man of the house at the time. I was 16, living with my GF, her mom, and little sister. The dog began to whine for a walk. The dog and I left the two-family house and strolled up the block with zero worries. Usually the dog wasn't allowed to walk ahead of me, but tonight was chill, and walking the dog was the last of my responsibilities. I let him sniff his way up the street until we were almost at the entrance of a large walkway bridge behind our home that goes for a few miles over the Hudson River. Poughkeepsie is a waterfront city, and the bridge goes from my home to the other side of the river in the next county. So maybe you can picture a large bridge that towers over my neighborhood. It was dark, no wind, and slightly foggy. The street lights lit our path. We were the only ones to occupy the sidewalk. No cars passing by. We were alone. My dog had just learned to raise his leg and pee, so I congratulated him with a pat and rub on his chest. We kept it moving. Then I heard the strangest whistle. It was almost playful, and I didn't think anything of it. It came from across the street, the opposite side of the bridge. Whistle. There it was again. From the same direction. The dog heard it too, and perked his ears up, and began tilting his head from side to side in a curious sort of way. Whistle. His head perked up even more. You hear that, boy? What's that? Whistle. This time, I did my best to copy the noise, to make fun with the dog. He looked at me, then looked back. We stood there quietly. Then from behind me, where the top of the bridge was, I heard it. Whistle. It was the same whistle. I observed the dog. He was facing the bridge, tracking the whereabouts of the sound. Whistle. The noise came from across the street again, from where we first heard it, but closer. Then fear struck my belly. My girlfriend's mom told me stories about a couple days before this. Stories about humans who use witchcraft and shapeshift into flying demons at night, kidnapping and terrorizing humans after they whistle. When daylight comes, they change back into their original form. The thing that struck me at that moment was, she mentioned, never whistle at night, and I did it. Whistle. I heard it behind the bridge again, but further down the street. The dog's ears went back, and his head lowered to the ground. I saw this weird scared look that I've never seen from the young dog before. Whistle. It was back across the street, but closer and louder. We began to pace back home. I had no pockets to rummage around for a weapon. I was defenseless. While we were walking back, I felt like I was being watched. Hard. I felt this weird sensation. It was not fear. It was doom I was feeling. The whistling stopped, but I could still feel this pressure in the air. This wasn't over. I don't remember what I began to yell, but I called whatever it was on, telling it to come out and face me or else. I was almost home. It felt like my yelling was the only thing that kept me safe. When I walked in and locked the door, there was hardly any relief. It wasn't that I didn't feel safe. I felt disturbed. I had to ask about the whistling. I ran upstairs to my girlfriend, who was in the restroom. The door was open, but I managed to bust in anyways, out of excitement. Babe, what did you and your mom say about whistling at night? Oh, easy. What did you do? Nothing. I was just asking. Geez. Oh man. The last thing I needed was grief from her, while I was bursting with emotions already. I walked down the hall to her mother's room. Her door was open. Irene. Yes. I proceeded in. My girlfriend's younger sister was laying in bed, next to her mom and baby sister. The bed was next to 3 windows which were open. Smiling, her mom said, I heard you hollering around outside. I was wondering what that was, but it was just you. Irene, didn't you say something about not whistling at night? Her smile quickly became a frown. Easy, what did you do? Nothing. I just heard this whistle, and I kind of copied it in. Oh Lord. Easy. Then while she was about to reprimand me, we began hearing these wings, beating wings coming down to our roof. Fwoom fwoom fwoom, the younger sister heard it. She threw the covers over her head and began bawling loudly. Mom began praying in Spanish so fast. All I could think was, so, they hear it too. The wings thrashed the air once more before we heard clunk cluck. It sounded like 2 clawed feet landed in the roof just outside the window. The only thing between us was a screen to keep the bugs out. Irene kept praying, Ariel kept crying, and I just stood there. I couldn't let my family be afraid. I leaped forward to push the screen tabs in, and pushed the screen up and out of my way. I knew what was happening, but I had to see it for myself. No. It was too late. I thrust my head out of the window to meet this thing. Flash. All I know is, when I poked my head out, I saw a blinding white light. Mom said it was lighting. She said she pulled me back in after it happened. But what bothers me the most is, I don't remember seeing the beast. I don't remember seeing the lightning, but it happened right in my face. I poked my head out to see it, and I don't remember coming back in. I was just back inside somehow. I just experienced something, and it's already left my memory. The dog saw the lighting and ran like hell. Shortly after it rained. We locked the house up and tossed and turned for the remainder of the morning. This was my first supernatural experience.